غزة جريمة مستمرة. هكذا اخترنا عنوان مؤتمرنا الإعلامي اليوم. 74 عاما على احتلال فلسطين، وأكثر من 15 عاما على فرض الاحتلال الغاصب حصاره الخانق على
Israeli occupation has been imposing the suffocating siege on Gaza, and Gaza is a very populated area where 2 million people live in 5 governorates. Among them, 71% are living in one area. They live a catastrophic situation, and this catastrophe has aggravated because of the siege. More than 4,000 people have been killed. %77 have been damaged by Israeli occupation. All sectors in the Gaza Strip have been affected by the Israeli occupation siege. Including the health sector and economy of the Gaza Strip has also damaged. In addition to the infrastructure in the Gaza Strip and electricity lone power plant was also damaged by Israeli pumping. Today in our forum we will discuss the consequences of the Israeli occupation siege on the Gaza Strip through 3 sessions in the forum. The first session, managed by Mr. Yusuf Ghabin, on the role of the international community in breaking the siege. The second session will tell Al-Madhoun about the Israeli and now we're having Ahmad Abortima talking about the organizers' bodies of the international body. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. In the name of organizers of the international forum, the Siege of Gaza, a continued crime, organized by Days of Palestine Foundation in partnership with We Are Not Numbers team at the 16th October group, we express our thanks and gratitude to all of you for attendance and participation. Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip since 2007 is a flagrant violation of all international laws and humanitarian norms. It's a collective punishment that has caused suffering to civilians in all sectors of life. Hundreds of patients died because of the Israeli occupation and prevented them from their natural rights to access hospital and receive medical care. This blockade has undermined the Palestinian economy and prevented process of self-development, aggravated poverty and unemployment rates, and deprived citizens of their natural rights to freedom of movement and travel. Israeli occupation claimed it withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005, while Israeli occupation are still classified as occupying power that controls the Gaza Strip and its ports. Therefore, they are legally responsible for the humanitarian conditions in the besieged Gaza Strip. This siege would not have lasted 15 years till it was supported by international complicity that gives the occupation a cover to its violation with safe cover from accountability. Therefore, this forum aims to shed light on the suffering caused by the Israeli occupation forces siege, because the passage of time for suffering does not cancel it and does not mean adapting to it. The continuation of suffering for a long means that there are new losses in souls and property that are still happening every day. Confronting the Israeli siege requires enhancing a global front that includes all believers in justice and human rights, and reject the occupation forces and racial discrimination. In order to have this front strong and effective, it must include official, parliamentary, media, and human rights bodies, and work to raise the voice in every forum, so that the death and suffering of civilians does not become the result of a political decision with collective punishment. It's a normal thing. Dear brothers and sisters, it's very important to remember that the siege is not a humanitarian problem in its sense, even though it has caused huge human suffering and its consequences. The siege is a continuation of policies of displacement, aggression, occupation, and the systematic pursuit of expelling the indigenous people from Palestine and killing any determination or will within them to resist the Israeli occupation. The siege is a continuation of the catastrophe launched by Israeli occupation against the Palestinian people since its established in 1948. The siege comes in the same aggressive context in which comes the construction of walls and settlement in the West Bank, in the same context in which racial discrimination and displacement are practiced by Israeli occupation forces against Palestinian people in occupied Palestine since 1948. It's also the same context in which Israeli occupation continues to prevent millions of refugees who were expelled from Palestine in 1948 from returning to their homes so far. We hope that this forum will contribute to raising awareness of this ongoing Israeli crime and contribute to strengthening solidarity efforts by the free people of the world in the direction of the victory of truth and justice against injustice and aggression. Assalamu alaikum. Now we listen to the parliament member in the Finnish parliament, Anna Kantola, who tried to break the Gaza Siege 2 years ago through borders of Khan Yunis, but the Israeli occupation forces detained it and deported her from the country. We listen to Anna Kantola now.
Syksyllä 2019 Berliinin muurin murtumisesta tuli kuluneeksi 30 vuotta. Saksassa tätä tapahtumaa juhlistettiin suurin elein ja tähän juhlintaan osallistui myös sosiaalinen media. Muun muassa Twitterissä monet julkisuuden henkilöt tuomitsivat Berliinin muuria tahranneet ihmisoikeusrikokset ja peräänkuuluttivat historian muistamista, jotta vastaavaa ei enää koskaan tapahtuisi. Ja olen samaa mieltä. Berliinin muuri on ehdottomasti yksi niistä asioista, jotka on hyvä muistaa, jotka pitää muistaa. Ja kuitenkin, samaan aikaan Israel jatkoi oman muurinsa rakentamista laittomasti saartamansa Gazan ympärille. Muurin taakse, Gazaan, jää vangiksi noin 2 miljoonaa ihmistä. 2 miljoonaa ihmistä, joilla on toiveita ja unelmia ja halu elää vapaina. Palestiinalaiset kärsivät modernin historian pisimpään jatkuneesta miehityksestä ja Israelin kansainvälistä oikeutta systemaattisesti rikkovasta politiikasta ja ihmisoikeusloukkauksista. Gazan saarto itsessään on YK:n ja usean ihmisoikeusjärjestön mukaan kansainvälisen oikeuden vastainen, siviilejä kollektiivisesti rankaiseva, ja se on ajanut Gazan humanitaariseen ja sosioekonomiseen kriisiin. Tuolloin vuonna 2019 päätin tosissani saada kotimaani Suomen näkemään meille kaukaiseen Gazaan. Yhdessä kansainvälisen aktivistiryhmän kanssa pyrimme järjestämään Gazan rajalle mielenilmauksen kiinnittääksemme huomion Gazan epätoivoiseen tilanteeseen. Tavoitteemme oli, että tietoisuus Gazan tilanteesta kasvaisi ja syntyisi riittävä paine Suomen ja Israelin välisen asekaupan jäädyttämiseksi, sillä Suomen asekauppa tukee kansainvälisen oikeuden vastaisen tilan jatkumista. Matkaa valmistellessani ajattelin paljon Gazassa asuvia ihmisiä. Mitä nuori tarvitsee valoisaan tulevaisuuteen? Riittävän ravinnon, turvallisuuden, terveydenhuollon kasvaakseen tasapainoiseksi itsenäiseksi aikuiseksi. Mahdollisuuden seikkailla, rakastua ja itsenäistyä. Jotain, mistä unelmoida ja mitä kohde pyrkiä. Kaikkea tätä omilla lapsillani on, ja useimmilla gazalaisilla ei ole. Jos joltakulta lapsistani vietäisiin vapaus ja tulevaisuus, olisi se vuoren kokoinen tragedia. Gazassa on 1 miljoona lasta ilman vapautta ja tulevaisuutta. Heistä jokainen on jonkun lapsi, yhtä tärkeä kuin minun lapseni. Valitettavasti me emme koskaan päässeet Gazaan saakka, sillä Israelin viranomaiset pysäyttivät meidät. Suomessa matkastani kuitenkin uutisoitiin ja kerroin, miten myös Suomi tukee aseostoillaan kansainvälisen oikeuden vastaista muuria länsirannalla ja ihmisoikeusloukkauksia Gazassa. Vaadin Suomea lopettamaan asekaupan israelilaisten yhtiöiden kanssa. Jatkamme tätä työtä edelleen, jotta palestiinalaiset voisivat elää vapaina. Berliinin muurin historian valossa meidän ei pitäisi sallia Gazan muurin rakentamista. Israelin ei voi antaa jatkaa siirtokuntien laajentamista, Gazan saartoa ja palestiinalaisten sortamista. Israelin laittomat siirtokunnat ovat kansainvälisen oikeuden vastaisia ja ne muodostavat esteen rauhan saavuttamiselle. Rauhan edellytyksenä on Israelin miehityksen ja siirtokuntien lakkauttaminen, apartheidin lopettaminen sekä kaikkien alueen asukkaiden tasavertaiset ihmisoikeudet.
الله وبركاته. This is Sahar Taysir Kallu. Actually, I'm very happy seeing you all here, alert and breaking up ears for today's International Forum discussions, and feeling so excited, starting this session with its motion, Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip from legal and human dimensions. Before digging deeper into the motion of this session, I would kindly invite you all as Palestinians witnessing and bearing the brunt of this ogre, devouring everything we try to cling to in life. I'd like to invite you all to flashback and count how many times this brutal, savage, barbarian blockade has affected you in all ways. How many times you were deprived the right of going abroad for an international conference, a scholarship, or visiting one of your relatives, simply because of this barbarian blockade. You had everything ready, your stuff, your visa, and you missed the opportunity for the 100th time because of this blockade. How many times you observed your beloved ones dying in front of your eyes, simply because they could not move or could not get a medication permit crossing areas, Bet Hanun or Rafah, Egypt, crossing borders, or how many times, how many dreams you lost in all aspects of economic, trading, educational, environmental, and social aspects because of this savage blockade of this 365 kilometers area you were born in. We all know how the international law was designed across a broad range of domains, including war, diplomacy, trade, and human rights to all people in the whole world, to live freely and peacefully at times of peace and war. But what is it like when it comes to Palestinians? Is this international law going to be a deterrent preventing the continuous and severely repeated violations against Palestinians? High on the list is the cruel Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip for almost 16 years. People between living and dying, what is their position from the perspective of the international law? For more details, I'm so gratified welcoming my guest for today's session, influentially speaking in the heart of the motion, Mr. Dan Kovlik, Ms. Julie Pullman, and Dr. Salah Abdelati. Please, if you have any questions or thoughts, write them down. Do not ask in the middle. And we'll be receiving and hearing your questions and thoughts once we have the speakers end their talk. So first of all, we will have Dr. Salah Abdelati, the chairman of the International Committee Supporting Human Rights for Palestinians, speaking and discussing the human and legal situation of the Israeli blockade of the Gaza Strip. The stage is yours, Doctor.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. All greetings for all the attendants and all the participants and who see us through social media platforms right now. Today we were talking about the Gaza Siege that has been imposed on the Israeli occupation forces. Israel has imposed the suffocating siege on the Gaza Strip from January 26, 2006. I want to confirm that such crime raised to be a war crime according to the Article 33 and Covenants of Lahai and Rome. The Israeli siege, according to the international conscience, legal conscience, this siege is a marginalizing crime against humanity. This siege includes many violations, including aggressions for Israeli wars on the Gaza Strip, which caused thousands of Palestinians who lost their lives, including children, in addition to wide destruction to the infrastructure and homes of the Palestinian citizens. And till this moment, we have many homes for Palestinians are still destroyed. And the last aggression was in May 2021, and we saw a large destruction for the infrastructure and prevention for the construction materials to come into the Gaza Strip. This affects large sectors of Palestinian citizens. The Israeli is not only a war crime or a crime against humanity. It violates all international norms and humanitarian laws that guarantee all rights, economic and legal. It violates many the International Charter for Human Rights, and all sectors in the Gaza Strip have affected and damaged by the Israeli occupation forces. Also, aggressions continue along the border siege of the Gaza Strip, and also we have aggressions against the West Bank, the occupied West Bank. We have more than 2 million people besieged in the Gaza Strip under Israeli suffocating siege. This siege affected the fishing sector, prevented Israeli occupation forces, prevented Palestinian fishermen from fishing in the Gaza Sea, and also imposed isolation zone along the borders that reached from 300 to 50 meters along the borders. This isolation zone is still there, and the Israeli occupation forces is still violating the human rights. More than 75% the unemployment rate. 74% of population of the Gaza are living depending on international aid. More than 70% unemployment among the Palestinian youth. We also noticed the migration of the Gazan youth abroad. Dozens of them have died through their trips on the sea in order to flee the suffering of the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. We have a problem of preventing of the Gazan patient to travel abroad and get treatment. Israeli occupation forces prevent 76% of Gaza patients who demand permits for treatment abroad. Israeli occupation forces prevent them. Of course, this banning conclude to death of 56 people have died because of prevention of medical treatment abroad and banning them to get permits to treatment abroad. We have also rounds of violence waged by Israeli occupation forces against people of Gaza. 97% of the water of the Gaza is not suitable for drinking, and also the only power plant in the Gaza Strip was pumped by Israeli occupation forces, so we suffer from severe power severe power shortage. We have only 8 hours of electricity per day in the Gaza Strip. And even we reached 4 hours only of power per day in the Gaza Strip. The electricity sector suffers a lot of the Israeli occupation siege on the Gaza Strip. The Israeli siege prevent Gaza population from getting enough power per day. All of these consequences resulted from the Israeli suffocating siege imposed in the Gaza Strip. All the claims by the Israeli occupation forces not to lift the Israeli siege are just in vain and have no credibility. They prevent materials to come into the Gaza Strip that are necessary for life. They count everything for every citizen living in the Gaza Strip, and because of that they restrict everything coming into the Gaza Strip. The Israeli suffocating siege affected all sectors of life, the services sectors, health sectors, electricity sectors. Even when they want to facilitate things that come into the Gaza Strip, they are just doing little things in order to decrease the Gaza Strip siege. The international community is demanded to stop being silent. They joined the continuation of Israeli siege to swap deals of prisoners. According to Geneva treatment, Israeli as occupying power is demanded to lift the siege on the Gaza Strip and to stop the different crimes they are committing against Palestinian civilians. They are responsible for reviving and reconstructing the institutions in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Authority is required also to stop the punitive collective punishment against the Palestinian employees, which raised to a crime against humanity, including stopping salaries of the employees and other assistance provided to poor families, and stopping providing hospitals of Gaza with the needed equipment. All the services sectors are suffering from the Israeli occupation siege. Our struggle is just in order to expose the Israeli crimes against Palestinian people and all the sectors of services and economy, and also against civilians. We have complete generation living in Gaza without seeing a complete day of power in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli occupation justifies the violations against Gaza and its population with the resistance against its occupation. The Palestinian people has the right to resist the occupation and to resist the crimes committed by Israeli forces against its people. The world has to finish this problem and to pressure the Israeli occupation forces to stop the occupation and give the Palestinian people their natural rights. The continuation of Israeli occupation siege on the Gaza Strip is shame on the international community and the whole world and all free people. We salute and appreciate the position of all international bodies and all free people who stand against the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip and its aggressions against Gaza and its aggression against Palestinian prisoners. We call on more pressures to be put on the Israeli occupation to stop such crimes and to stop the crime of the siege on the Gaza Strip. and to start the reconstruction processes and provide humanitarian aid to the population of Gaza, because population of Gaza deserve dignified life. And thank you.
شكرا دكتور صلاح عبد العاطي رئيس الهيئة الدولية لحقوق الإنسان. نستمع الآن إلى ريتشارد فولك المقرر السابق للأمم المتحدة المعني بحالة حقوق الإنسان في الأراضي الفلسطينية.
My greetings to all of you who are participating in this event. I wish we could meet in person, and I'm sure we will in some time, not too far in the future. I am very grateful to the conveners of this event for giving me the opportunity to participate. I admire very much the undertaking of We Are Not Numbers to give concrete understanding of the failed efforts of Israel to dehumanize the people of Gaza, and what one does, in my view, very movingly and effectively, is to humanize and transcend the tragic circumstances which have afflicted Gaza for so many decades. And I begin my remarks by saluting the inspirational quality of the way in which the people of Gaza have creatively resisted and creatively persevered in building lives for themselves that are meaningful and sustained dreams of something better as part of their resistance. It's a very important example for those of us living under less burdensome conditions. I want to use these few minutes to talk really about two things. First, the flagrant violations of international humanitarian law that have created a regime of repression in Gaza that is maintained by Israel as the occupying and abusive power. And to address this pattern of abuse from the perspective of international humanitarian law and the Fourth Geneva Convention on the obligations of an occupying power. And secondly, to briefly discuss the failure of the international community to act in a much more serious and effective manner in response to this unlawful and indecent ordeal to which the people of Gaza have been subjected. Ever since the imposition of the blockade on Gaza in 2007, the population, the civilian population, numbering nearly 2 million at this point, has been subjected to a set of circumstances that violate the most basic obligations of an occupying power, as outlined in the Fourth Geneva Convention that deals with belligerent occupation. This siege of Gaza that affects both its economic, psychological, and political circumstances is a gigantic and continuing flagrant violation of Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits collective punishment. And it is a matter of widespread consensus that the civilian population of Gaza has been victimized by numerous forms of collective punishment. First of all, by the siege itself, but that siege has been aggravated periodically by unlawful military operations carried on by Israel every few years on a massive scale, inflicting heavy casualties. The basic idea of international humanitarian law, and specifically belligerent occupation, is set forth in Article 3, which clearly prohibits this kind of behavior. It implores the occupying Israeli power to treat civilians in all circumstances humanely. That's the language from Article 3, paragraph 1. And then further in Article 3 in Section C, it further outlaws outrages upon personal dignity, in particular humiliating and degrading treatment. And I needn't stress or specify the degree to which the people of Gaza have been consistently and systemically subject to degrading and humiliating behavior. And it's only by their heroic form of perseverance that they have not succumbed to the multiple dimensions of the hardships resulting from the siege and from this form of military oversight that is periodically underscored by vicious and massive military operations. And it should be clearly understood that a siege of this sort that has confined an impoverished and crowded population within a territory no larger than 1% of the totality of Israel, is Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, in other words, historic Palestine, is by itself a continuing kind of abusive violation of the idea of fundamental idea of international humanitarian law. Israel, of course, claims that it shed all its international obligations when it applied its so-called disengagement plan in 2005 under the leader, when it was being led by Ariel Sharon, and it did indeed withdraw the 8,000 settlements, destroyed the 8,000 settlers, and destroyed the settlements in Gaza, but it didn't, according to the UN and the international consensus among jurists, it didn't give up its control over Gaza, and therefore it was continued to be, from a legal point of view and a political and moral point of view, the occupying power subject to the Geneva Conventions. And therefore, the fact that it withdrew its troops and settlers is, from a legal standpoint, irrelevant, because it rigidly controls entry and exit from Gaza, the airspace, the sea off the coast of Gaza, and it defies international law in many ways by conducting unlawful assassinations, by failing to protect the civilian population, and by using its air and sea and land military forces against an essentially vulnerable people. So I think it is beyond reasonable controversy that the behavior of Israel is a serious, severe, continuing violation of the fundamental duties of a member of the UN and of a sovereign state to respect these fundamental norms of international law. I want to also say a few words about the degree to which the international community has abandoned or failed to live up to its responsibilities to react to this kind of severe situation of deprivation of rights and violation of the law. It has enacted with great fanfare the responsibility to protect NOR in 2005, unanimously approved by the General Assembly, and imposing on the international community a duty, a firm duty, to respond to situations of where a civilian population is exposed to serious criminal violations and crimes against humanity, and where the responsible government fails or is unable to uphold its legal, moral, and political responsibilities. And so I end by indicting the UN and the international community for overlooking this most serious challenge to the notion of an international community that takes responsibility for the well-being of civilians and a civilian population, and particularly a population that has been denied basic rights after being under the auspices of the UN. The UN has a special responsibility for Palestine that it has never fulfilled and has been sidetracked by the distorting interventions of geopolitics, specifically the United States and the EU, have had a shameful record in relation to the evolution of Palestine since the British Mandate. I thank you for giving me this opportunity and for your patience, and wish the people of Gaza a better future and a sense of greater urgency by those of us around the world to show solidarity with the continuing plight of the Gazan people. Thank you.
ريتشارد فولك المقرر السابق للأمم المتحدة المعني بحالة حقوق الإنسان في الأراضي الفلسطينية. والآن نستمع لكلمة دان كوفليك، محاضر وناشط قانوني وأستاذ حقوق الإنسان والسلام في جامعة بيتسبرغ، يناقش البعد الإنساني والقانون الدولي للحصار على غزة.
Good day. My name is Dan Kovalik, and I've been asked to talk about the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It is a crisis, not a natural crisis. It is a crisis being imposed by Israel with the help of the United States, which is bankrolling Israel and its military to the tune of $3 billion a year. Right now, as we speak, around 2 million residents of Gaza are suffering from a fatal lack of fresh water, of sewage, of food, of medicines, and this is being done to them by Israel, which in fact is holding up as we speak necessary equipment to sustain Gaza's water system. And in fact, over and over, Israel has attacked a key infrastructure in Gaza, their water system, their sewage system, concrete factories necessary to build and to rebuild homes that Israel bombs from time to time. And certainly these constitute war crimes, under the Geneva Conventions and other international humanitarian law instruments. Occupying forces like Israel are required to actually make sure that civilians are protected and that they have the life-saving equipment and supplies and water and food and medicines that they need to survive. And in fact, Israel is intentionally denying Gaza those things. Israel is intentionally denying the people of Gaza the right of freedom of movement guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They are preventing the people of Gaza from moving freely in and out of Gaza, to freely move in and out of Palestine to other countries if they choose, and to return to Gaza. And what we have is a humanitarian crisis where Gaza has become unlivable. The UN predicted years ago that by 2020, meaning 2 years ago, Gaza would become unlivable. Well, we're 2 years past that, and Gaza is unlivable. The Secretary General of the United Nations, in fact, said Gaza is a living hell, and that is the case. It is a place where people cannot expect to live full lives. They cannot expect to raise children in a healthful environment, and thus children are suffering incredible psychological ailments on a mass scale within Gaza. And again, this is all according to plan. A lot of people talk about the fact that Israel is imposing an apartheid type system on the occupied territories. To me, that's obvious, and that's true. But what not enough people are talking about is the fact that Israel is actually committing a slow-moving genocide against the people of Gaza. And what do I mean by that? The Genocide Convention, which was passed in 1948 in response to the Holocaust, is very clear that it is illegal and that individuals can be held personally responsible for committing acts like denying people of certain ethnic and national groups life-saving supplies like food and water and medicines, with the intent to destroy in whole or in part that national or ethnic group as such. And that's exactly what's happening. Israel is intentionally destroying the Palestinian people in Gaza with the intent to take over that territory. They've wanted to ethnically cleanse Gaza. They've tried to do that. That has failed, and now they've decided that they're just going to kill off the people of Gaza if they can over time. And that's exactly what's happening, And with the Genocide Convention, the first human rights law passed by the international community after World War II, the world made it clear that it will not tolerate genocide. That, in fact, the Commission of Genocide requires the nations of the world to act to stop that genocide. Instead, the world, at best, is standing quietly aside and allowing this genocide to happen. At worst, countries, particularly like the United States, are aiding and abetting that genocide by supplying Israel with billions of dollars of military assistance, by providing diplomatic cover at the United Nations, vetoing time and time again resolutions that would require the world to act to save and protect the people of Gaza against this genocide. And so this is not an inevitable thing. This is what's happening to Gaza, and that's what's the situation is. It's happening to them, being imposed upon them, is preventable and stoppable, and the world must act immediately to do that. The United Nations, through the Security Council, through the International Criminal Court, must act to stop Israel's continued blockade of life-saving items to Gaza, must require Israel to tear down the wall that is surrounding Gaza, which has turned Gaza
شكرا دان كوفليك المحاضر والناشط القانوني وأستاذ حقوق الإنسان والسلام في جامعة بيتسبرغ. والآن ننتقل إلى جولي بولمان، صحفية استقصائية نيوزيلندية وناشطة سياسية ومجتمعية للقضية الفلسطينية تناقش حصار غزة من وجهة نظر القانون الدولي.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Julie Webb Pullman from New Zealand. It's terrible that I actually have to be here today, that the siege of Gaza means from New Zealand. It's terrible that I actually have to be here today, that the siege of Gaza means that every person of good conscience has to stand and be here. Because we're now entering the 16th year of the Israeli siege of Gaza. A siege that has absolutely no legal or moral justification and that has resulted in what the UN described as the de-development of the territory. A process by which development isn't merely hindered but actually reversed. We have the proof of this in front of our eyes. Before the blockade was strengthened in 2007, people and goods moved in and out of Gaza through 6 crossings. When the blockade was strengthened, half the crossings were closed, leaving only Egypt's Rafah and Israel's Erez and Kerem Abu Shalom, which is only for goods. But the number of people permitted to leave between 2005 and 2020 absolutely plummeted. Through Erez from 30,000 a month to 4,620, and through Rafah from 40,000 to 4,245. Thousands of students missed chances to take up scholarships to study abroad, and thousands of other people lost their lives because they didn't receive medical treatment or they just weren't permitted to travel. The 4 Israeli military offensives on Gaza, 2008, 12, 14 and 21, each exacerbated Gaza's already dire situation. Thousands of Palestinians were killed, many of them children, and tens of thousands of homes, schools and office buildings were destroyed. Israeli missile attacks and ground incursions have also damaged Gaza's pipelines and sewage treatment infrastructure. As a result, sewage often seeps into drinking water, which has resulted in a sharp increase in waterborne diseases. 95% of Gaza's water is now undrinkable. Rebuilding has been next to impossible because the siege prevents construction materials such as steel and cement from reaching Gaza. UNRWA reported that the number of Palestinian refugees relying on it for food has increased from less than 80,000 in 2000 to about 1 million in 2018, and that was 4 years ago. As a result, over 80% of Gaza's population have become dependent on international aid. According to UNCTAD report issued in November 2020, the economic cost to Gaza of the Israeli occupation and siege during the past decade alone is estimated at $16.7 billion. The health sector is where we can see the most devastating effects of the siege. The medicine deficit rose from 16% in 2005 to 47% in 2020. And it's even worse for cancer drugs, the deficit of which is 63%. Breast cancer survival dropped from 60% to 42% in the same period, while approval for patient permits to travel for medical treatment dropped from 97% to a measly 28%. So not only is Gaza under siege, but the population is being slowly and surely annihilated through medical neglect on top of military attacks. We can't escape the fact that the de-development the UN described is not a prediction for the future, but a deadly reality. 2.2 million people are still living under siege. An entire generation has never known any other life, has never enjoyed the human rights people in the West take for granted. A generation who are shot dead or maimed at the walls of their open-air prison if they dare to try to claim these rights. From the international law perspective, the siege of Gaza qualifies as a war crime. Collective punishment is specifically prohibited under Article 33 of the Geneva Convention. Israel is also breaching the law of occupation. Israeli authorities are obliged under international law to respect the rights of the Palestinian population without arbitrary restrictions or conditions. They must ensure the adequate provision of health, electricity, water and other basic services, but they remain in gross breach of these obligations. The siege also breaches several of the human rights guaranteed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, such as the right to movement, to education, to work, to health. These rights are basically denied to all but an ever-decreasing few in Gaza. Who should be protecting these rights? I believe that not only the Israeli authorities, but also the United Nations, specifically the United Nations Security Council, which must be held accountable. The latter for its abject failure to uphold the rule of law, particularly humanitarian law, and that is in breach of the UN Charter itself. As Noura Erakat pointed out over 10 years ago, the Security Council has used its Chapter 7 authority to authorise the use of force and or impose sanctions in numerous cases since its establishment. She quotes the imposition of restrictions on the former Yugoslavia and Somalia when they were experiencing similar humanitarian crises. She pointed out that only 2 Security Council resolutions have ever been passed with regard to Gaza, and neither of these condemned the siege, but dealt with it as a political instead of a humanitarian issue. This differential treatment of Gaza smacks of humanitarian apartheid. There is no justification for the siege of Gaza in humanitarian or international law, and there is even less justification for the biased way in which the UN Security Council has brazenly ignored the humanitarian imperative in the Gaza situation, as it didn't do for Somalia and Yugoslavia, both of which were responded to as humanitarian, not political crises. So what can we do? Increase the pressure on the international community, and particularly on the UN, to demand that the siege of Gaza be declared unequivocally illegal. What else can the UN do? The Security Council has the ability to use military force to reconstruct Gaza if necessary. It has the power to ensure the delivery of humanitarian relief to Gaza through international waters without Israeli interference. If New Zealand, the country I was born in, was able to send a frigate into the French nuclear testing zone in the Pacific to end nuclear testing there, how much easier for the UN, the enormous UN, to send in container ships full of humanitarian aid, either to the port of El Arish or directly to Gaza, to be unloaded at sea into smaller boats for transfer to shore, because Israel has destroyed the port. This is how goods were delivered to Gaza for thousands of years, so it can certainly be done again. And the ships do not need to return empty. There are plenty of passengers waiting to travel for healthcare, work, study and family reasons. If a little country like New Zealand can end nuclear testing, the enormous UN can surely end the siege of Gaza. Most importantly, The UN Security Council has a clear and urgent responsibility to impose sanctions on Israeli authorities, businesses and cultural entities until the siege and the illegal military occupation of Palestine are ended once and for all. If this requires reform of the UN system so the power of veto is reduced, such that a 2/3 majority overrides the veto, for instance, then so be it. Reform the UN, end the siege of Gaza, end the occupation of Palestine, especially end Israeli and United Nations Security Council apartheid. Thank you.
Thank you for Bolly Jolly Whitman, and now we leave to a discussion with Dr. Salah Abdul Ati. Any questions? What's your question, please? We have one of the attendees asking about documentation of the Israeli crimes against the Gaza Strip and how we can make use of it to hold Israel accountable for these crimes. Any other questions?
التي صدرت في هذا المجال ولكن ليس مستغرب نحن أولا
We are not surprised. We as Palestinian people under occupation, we have a program to liberate. Really, we have problems in administrating the public affairs. We have only the representative of the Palestinian Authority. When we want to internationalize the cause of Palestine, in this context, Israeli occupation put pressures in order not to internationalize the Palestinian cause, and unfortunately the Palestinian Authority complied to the Israeli pressures. According to its relations with the United States, and also afraid of cutting the aid provided to the Palestinian Authority. Israeli occupation committed human rights crimes or crimes against humanity that raised war crimes, including pumping and eradicating entire families, and caused thousands of Palestinians martyrs.
على أثرها السلطة وفي نهاية العام تقدمت بطلب للتوقيع على ميثاق روما. بدأت بالنفاذ.
In the late of the last year, PA asked to sign Roma Charter,
في 12 يناير من عام 2015.
and also many steps to provide it in 2015 and other years in order to investigate the Israeli crimes against Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and Lahai. We warned that going in this course without having adequate evidences and we haven't the official as a member in the United Nations, and it was better for us to have, according to the Article 14, to investigate these crimes. We have a national committee that was formed in order to pursue the Israeli crimes against Palestinian people.
الآن وبالتالي بتنا أمام مسار غير جاد.
Now we haven't serious cause in order to investigate these crimes. There was no serious steps by the Palestinian Authority to hold Israel accountable for these crimes. So we formed a committee held by the passed away Saba Rikat. We called on the committee to resign. After Rikat has passed away, the committee was not activated. When Trump brought the deal of the century and removed the U.S. embassy into Jerusalem, we have difficult obstacles in front of the Palestinian people in the course of resisting the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip, and even when the ICC declared that it has opportunity to investigate the Israeli crimes, it faced pressures by the US and the aid was cut of the ICC. We have files of the crimes of the Israeli settlers and also the issue of settlements. We profiled it to the ICC and also the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. And because of the efforts of rights bodies, we made achievement in this course, but our efforts were faced with obstacles by Israeli pressures that prevented international delegations from coming into the Gaza Strip and investigating the Israeli crimes. I have visited the ICC twice and provided them with all evidences and drafts that moved the investigation.
إقرار الولاية الجغرافية للمحكمة، لأن الولاية الجغرافية للمحكمة في ولاية موضوعية وولاية جغرافية المكان وولاية زمنية. محكمة الجنايات نشأت في عام 1998 وبدأت بالعمل في 2000
has the role to investigate these crimes committed by Israeli occupation forces and has availability and
ما بعد ذلك. وبالتالي لا يجوز لنا الذهاب للمحكمة في جرائم قبل شهر 7 2014.
we haven't opportunity to go to the ICC with the crimes before 7 July in 2014.
لست مستغرب أن يكون هذا الخبر صحيح لأن السلطة يوم تأجيل الانتخابات
Palestinian, when delaying the elections, delayed a hearing in front of the ICC about crimes in Jerusalem, and it violates all international laws and norms. The US administration, the last US administration, efforts to end the conflict, has failed to end the conflict, and now it's heading to administrate the conflict, to prolong it. They try to impose a political vision that the PA accepts and remain the situation as it is. When Karim Khan came, we expressed our rejection to this, and we will have an investigation by the ICC, so we see the results that have been achieved. And now, till 2022, we haven't received any response from the ICC Porter, and we have a problem of not activating the committee, and Abbas has to do this. The other problem is not providing the ICC with the evidences and drafts that document the Israeli crimes. And this is a national crime against the Palestinian people. Till when it has to continue. We have to head to all the international bodies, including ICC, in order to investigate crimes, especially that happened in the Israeli war in May 2021. All of our life sectors and aspects are damaged by the Israeli siege. We are talking about the damages that caused by the Israeli siege away from the Israeli wars, 4 wars along the 16th year of the Israeli siege. We have thousands of martyrs and injured people. All you have seen when Israeli occupation forces bombed entire neighborhoods and eradicated entire families in the last aggression on Gaza, including killing hundreds of civilians, journalists. These crimes are aimed to deliver a message to the Palestinian civilians not to support the Palestinian resistance, and they have to fight and confront the Palestinian resistance. Otherwise, they will suffer consequences through killing and bombing.
13,000 مخطط للاستيطان.
We have 13,000 settlement plans and schemes which are going to be implemented on the ground by the Israeli occupation forces. Also, we have incursions against the Aqsa Mosque by hundreds of settlements, Israeli settlers every day. Also, prevention of the Palestinian patients, prevention of getting treatment abroad and banning them from travel. Despite all of the efforts by human rights activists and rights bodies, and also condemnation of the Israeli policies, the Israeli occupation forces still impose the suffocating siege on the Gaza Strip. It was protected also and covered by the US, who used veto against any resolution that condemns Israeli occupation. On the other hand, we have acceleration of normalization with Israeli occupation, which cover the Israeli crimes and support the Israeli occupation to continue its crimes against Gaza. We have the PA weak and we have political division. Under the situation, we will be weak to demand our rights and defend ourselves. Before the siege, Gaza was sending aids to other regions, but now the situation is different. We have all infrastructure and homes destroyed, and the Israeli siege is the prolonged crime against people, besieged people in the Gaza Strip. Also, we are isolated. There is no contacts between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It damages the youths and their dreams. It damages the fishing sector. The only option we have is to continue our struggle with the Israeli occupation forces. The conflict with Israeli occupation will prolong. We have to compensate the retreat, the official retreat, and the official failure in representing the Palestinian rights and defending the rights of Palestinian people in the international forums.
نفعل ما يفعله السجناء والعاطلون عن العمل نربي الأمل لدينا أمل.
We have the hope, and we have to defend our hopes and our dreams. Gaza is a very important area and has dozens of activities. We are people, when having opportunity, we can deliver and pass our message to the whole world. By this, we will end the Israeli occupation against us.
شكرا للجميع. كانت جلسة ونقاشا مثمرا معكم جميعا، والآن نبقى مع استراحة لصلاة الظهر. هذه تحياتي وأمنيات الطيبة. سهر تيسير كلوب، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا.
17 عاما كانت المواقف الشعبية وجهود المناصرة من قبل المناصرين أو من قبل المواقف غير الرسمية ربما هي ذات اليد الأعلى من المواقف الرسمية تجاه الحصار. نبدأ الآن مع كلمة لجينيفر بينغ، وهي مديرة برنامج فلسطين في منظمة AFSC وناشطة في العمل المناصر للقضية الفلسطينية على مدار 40 عاما. الكلمة ربما نباشرها الآن.
The work that you do in Palestine, writing your stories, documenting life as you see it, and believing that one day there will be change is what makes it possible for advocates like me in the United States. The work that you do in Palestine, writing your stories, documenting life as you see it, and believing that one day there will be change is what makes it possible for advocates like me in the United States to do our part. I believe our work together will one day result in the dreams of freedom that we all wish to see. Ever since my first visit to Palestine in 1982, I've been moved by the courage of mothers, the creativity of children, the commitment of ways in which our government was underwriting the Israeli military occupation, giving diplomatic cover to Israel at the United Nations, and refusing to consider the human rights of Palestinians. I believe these friends and their children are among the majority of democratic identified people who today think our government should restrict U.S. aid to Israel. A Data for Progress poll asked voters this year about U.S. aid supporting human rights violations, like putting Palestinian children in Israeli military detention, demolishing Palestinian homes and properties, and expanding Israeli settlement colonies. 55% of likely voters and 72% of Democrats opposed U.S. military aid to Israel being used in this way. I believe these polls are a result of the work that has been done to reach Americans with stories, and 72% of Democrats opposed U.S. military aid to Israel being used in this way. I believe these polls are a result of the work that has been done to reach Americans with stories and documented evidence, focusing and sharing the experience of Palestinian life under Israeli military occupation. Palestinians like you have made award-winning films to tell your story. You've also taken video footage from your phones and cameras to document not only the abuse by Israeli soldiers, but also the beauty of your existence, your music, your poetry, your art, your dance, your landscapes, and yes, your food. Prior to the pandemic, many people in the United States were fortunate to experience Palestinian hospitality. Visitors to Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Palestinian communities inside the Green Line were welcomed into Palestinian homes. Visitors were invited to drink tea with nana, to taste the fruits in season, to marvel at a mezza spread, and to sit at the table for makluba, mansaf, or masachen. After visiting Palestine, they came home to the United States with stories that tell of walls, checkpoints, terrifying army night raids, overcrowded refugee camps, and other aspects of occupation and apartheid. But they also brought back home with them the experience of getting to know a Miriam, Yusuf, Mahmoud, Aisha, Saida, and Walid in their homes, schools, olive orchards, and shops. People like me became advocates for Palestine and engaged America with a narrative that demanded attention to the needs of millions of Palestinians denied their rights. Across America, in churches, on university campuses, and in civic associations, people held educational events, passed solidarity resolutions, engaged in boycotts, wrote their members of Congress, and published articles in the press challenging narratives that demonize Palestinians. You may notice that I specifically describe parts of Palestine that did not include Gaza. I am among the lucky few who can say she has also experienced the warm embrace of Palestinians in Gaza. I work for the American Friends Service Committee, which has an office in Gaza City, a non-governmental organization which has been present working in Gaza since the Nakba. The Quakers, as we are often called in Gaza, were among the first to assist Palestinians fleeing their homes in 1948 to Gaza. We turned over our work to UNRWA in the 1950s, but stayed engaged in Gaza, at first developing kindergartens and teacher training, and now developing programs in youth leadership and small humanitarian assistance. Because of this work, our staff, including internationals, have been able to travel for brief periods in and out of Gaza. The intended isolation of Gaza, beginning in the late 1990s, is criminal. The callousness in which politicians talk about mowing the lawn, putting Palestinians on a diet, and using military surveillance, weapons, and technology on a captive population to later sell as field tested, this too is criminal. I am fortunate to have walked along Gaza's shoreline as people celebrate weddings at night, even without streetlights. I've sailed in a fisherman's boat and looked over a daily catch of fish at the port. I've met students at the university who face high levels of unemployment despite being so talented in their fields of study. I have toured a Gaza factory and spoken with the owners who depend on unreliable electricity supplies. And I've played with children among their homes damaged by US supplied bombs. Many, if not most, advocates in the US have not had these opportunities. So how do we do our advocacy for Palestinians in Gaza? As I mentioned earlier, we depend on you. Your stories, your work to survive in conditions even the United Nations believes humans cannot bear. Your efforts to document your reality and use all available means to connect to the outside world. In recent years, we have used various techniques to engage people in the United States. Like you, we have used social media as a way to engage. In 2018, we organized a day to send virtual Valentines to Gaza. People around the United States took pictures of themselves holding a Valentine that said, "Love to Gaza." I'm not sure how many in Gaza saw this solidarity effort, but I do know that Americans learned through this project that in Gaza, people celebrate this day of love with candy, red roses, balloons, just like people do in the US. In other words, despite our differences, we do have something in common. We used the same technique to engage Americans during the summer when people attended outdoor farmers markets. We had volunteers in many different parts of the United States go out to survey people attending summer markets, asking them if they knew people grew strawberries in Gaza. While strawberry growing in Gaza is connected more to the agriculture of colonization versus indigenous agriculture, it is a surprise to many people, including to Palestinians who live in Gaza, that Gaza produces delicious strawberries in its sandy soil. We started the conversation in farmers markets in the US with a question about strawberries, a fruit many Americans love to eat. We asked, "Do you know Palestinians in Gaza grow strawberries?" Once we got their attention, we then had the opportunity to talk about the impact of the blockade on Palestinian agriculture and people's lives in Gaza. Prior to the blockade, strawberries were a profitable export for farmers in Gaza. But since Israeli imposed restrictions on Gaza's economy and exports, This industry has suffered, as has all agricultural production in Gaza. Our conversations about strawberries again help to humanize and connect Americans to Palestinians in Gaza in a way that challenged media coverage bias about Gaza. For as you are all too aware, the mainstream news continues a narrative that portrays Palestinians in Gaza as violent terrorists or victims due to their own corrupted leadership. Through our efforts, we want to help Americans see their common humanity with Palestinians in Gaza, people who love strawberries and Valentines, for instance. We also want Americans to see their responsibility to act to change U.S. policies that continue to cause harm, that continue to avoid accountability for human rights violations. When we have had the opportunity to bring Palestinians to Gaza, to the United States pre-pandemic, it was always great to listen to Americans' reactions to the stories about life in Gaza. Most people in America cannot fathom life without a steady supply of electricity or access to clean water or waiting for permits to travel for healthcare. Sadly, there are some communities in the US that are also denied these basic rights. Communities in the US which face racial injustice, colonization, and lack of economic opportunities particularly felt solidarity with our friends from Gaza. Hosting a Palestinian from Gaza helped us in the US realize how vital the ability to move freely is, and how Gaza's 2 million residents suffer from this lack of freedom of movement. During this past year, our connections to Gaza have necessarily been virtual. But despite time zone differences, many of you have been willing to join Zoom conversations as guest speakers. Sometimes these encounters include US elected officials who are beginning to advocate for lifting the cruel blockade of Gaza and questioning the continued US arms sales and military aid to Israel. It is vital that we build as many opportunities as possible to communicate our lived realities to one another. For most of us who experienced the isolation and restrictions on our freedom of movement during the COVID lockdowns, we gained even more respect for Palestinians' resilience, especially those of you who continue to live in Gaza despite over a decade of closure and isolation. As people in the US looked at rising needs for therapy and counseling to cope with the stress of the pandemic here in our communities, many took renewed interest in how Palestinians in Gaza cope with mental health challenges caused by the stresses of life under blockade. As our hospitals became overwhelmed by the pandemic, many Americans became more sensitive to the needs for adequate healthcare for all, including the critical role healthcare providers give to communities in crisis. Seeing people caring for the sick and injured in Gaza when so little resources exist moved many in the US to advocate both for restoring critical US humanitarian aid and for challenging the structures of occupation and blockade that perpetuate suffering and inequality. Finally, I want to say something about the Israeli military attacks on Gaza last May. Many of us here in the United States who have gotten to know you, either through your stories online, your presentations on Zoom, or in some cases through in-person visits, were mobilized to show our support for Palestine. Some of the largest street demonstrations for Palestine took place last May, even despite an ongoing pandemic. For instance, 25,000 people in Chicago marched and joined in the national calls, first for a ceasefire, and second for holding both Israel and the United States accountable for killing people and destroying homes, businesses, clinics, and schools. New Palestinian voices emerged in national mainstream media outlets. Even members of Congress publicly criticized Israel's attacks on Palestinian communities. For the first time in over a decade, a U.S. weapon sale to Israel was challenged in the U.S. Congress. Hundreds of civil society groups mobilized, ranging from allies in the Black Lives Matter movement and movement for climate justice, to allies in immigrant rights movements, to allies in many faith communities. People created online petitions, coordinated days to call members of Congress and the White House, drafted sign-on protest letters, and held educational events to amplify calls for Palestinian rights, equality, and freedom. Our challenge in the US is to keep up this engagement, even when the spectacular violence versus the everyday violence of occupation subsides. In October, a small group of activists from Christian, Muslim, and Jewish backgrounds came together in Chicago to remember and honor Palestinians who were killed last May. We made a long banner with ribbons listing the names of each life lost during the 11-day assault. We carried this banner to our federal government building and to the corporate offices of Boeing, the company that sells and profits from the bombs used to kill Palestinians. As we held up the banners in the pouring rain, we read out the names of over 260 Palestinians, honoring each person with a flower placed in a collective vase. We recommitted ourselves to remember and to act for justice in their names. We hear your pleas to remember that Palestinians in Gaza are not just numbers, not just statistics, not just demographic threats, not just victims, not just aggressors. We remain steadfast in our support to lift up your work, your dreams, your challenges, your lives. May the day come soon when we meet in person in a free Palestine.
الناشطة جينيفر بينغ على كلمتها المشاركة في هذا المؤتمر. طبعا تحدثت عن نقاط مهمة جدا جينيفر من منطلق تجربتها في
Alright, she has talked about her experience. She has emphasized the importance of the Western society to participate and to She talked about the importance of the daily life and the love of life of Palestinian people, not only the suffering under the occupation. She talked about the ways that we can support the Palestinian cause in the Western societies. She talked about the strawberry production and how it's distinguished in the world. She talked about the last aggression in May and emphasized about, she recommended the importance of talking about the Palestinian cause through the supporters and and to use social media platforms.
كل الشكر للمناصرين للقضية الفلسطينية وخصنا جينيفر على كلمتها. الآن نترككم مع فقرة تحت عنوان رسالة إلى العالم مع الطفلة المتميزة.
Now let us have Tala Madhoun and a message to the world.
وين تالا؟ تالا المدهون وين؟
هذا الصوت
ايش تالا؟ تخفيش عندي جدع على الكل بسمع. تعالي هنا عشان نصورك. لو هنا تقدر تمسك
I am 10. I am 2-year-old. My older brother is 3-year-old. Every one of my brothers and sisters has their own calculation, own memories of horrible, scary moments, childhood wrecking moments. War is my lifelong companion, as is it for hundreds of thousands like me. It is a dark attack on our childhood. I recall my normal school days with memories of rockets falling. I remember the fear of escaping from my school because of the violent assaults on my city, and my legs running directionless. If I had known what life in Gaza under siege would be like, I would have swooned back into my mother's womb. If I had known what life in Gaza under siege would be like, I would have swooned back into my mother's womb. We are children who have borne witness to the losses of our school friends, neighbors, relatives, loved ones, and families. We as Gazans are not permitted to exit this land and access the needed medications and treatment, or to travel, or to live, even for a little bit. We are isolated in a humanitarian crisis, especially in important sectors like healthcare. We are stripped of the ability to external resources and support. Our medical referrals are tied to the occupation's political dynamics. 1 month you have a better opportunity to exit, and others you don't. If we're fortunate, we get ill in the right month. We are also restricted in our ability to travel in our own homeland. Not only do we fight to travel abroad, but also within the fragmented parts of our land that is still being slowly shipped away. We live under a military impasse that injects into our dictionary words unfamiliar to many other contemporary peoples: blockade, isolation, apartheid, bombings, rights denial, discrimination, colonialism, ethnic cleansing, destruction, systemic deprivation. Being Palestinian is not enough of a reason to have our dreams killed. Neither is it enough to keep us separated from the lands we were dispossessed from, and the homes whose keys we still hold into. Nor is it enough to have our beloved family members get killed due to the inhumane military siege, all while clutching their home keys and dreaming of their lands in occupied Palestine. But now is the time to stop praising the smooth and resilience of the Gaza people and children, and stop heroizing our determination to life. We are humans who should not endure 15 years of ongoing suppression. We deserve a life called normal. It is time to lift the blockade, demolish the apartheid wall, besieging Gaza land and sea. It is time to fully open all of my home's crossings. It is time to lift restrictions on imports and exports. It is time for Palestinians in Gaza to have more than 6 hours of electricity a day. It is time for people like me to be able to visit their families whenever they wish in the 1948 occupied areas. It is time for my family to enjoy clean drinking water, healthcare, and freedom of movement. It is time to end Gaza's isolation and the dehumanization of my people in the media and popular culture. It is time for young people in Gaza to be able to secure jobs, travel, and see the world. It is time to permit Palestinians' family in Gaza to visit Al-Fahim, Ramallah, Al-Khalil, Haifa, Yafa, and Lid. It is time for Palestinians to eat Nabilsi Kanafa when they like to, and to plant olive and fig acres across their farmlands in Tul Karim under no colonial police abuses. It is time for Palestinians, Muslims, and Christians all together to go to Jerusalem and practice their spiritual faith without having to go through the humiliation of checkpoints set up by heavily armed security forces. It is time to listen to the Palestinian refugees in Gaza and those in exile who have been deprived of their right to go home for 7 decades now. Gaza's experience and history are essential to understanding how the Nakba continues to disrupt our life. It is time to amplify our voices, uphold our testimonies, and it is time for a free, independent Palestine. No compromise on justice, no compromise on equality, no compromise on freedom. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
نشكر الطفلة المتميزة تالا المدهون على هذه الكلمة.
We would like to thank. All right, now we would like to introduce to you David Cronin, an Irish author, journalist, and political activist. And he is going to talk about the European role in encouraging the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip and how they play an important role in increasing the siege imposed in Gaza.
Hello there. My name is David Cronin. I am an Irish journalist living in Brussels. I am an editor of the Electronic Intifada website, and I'm also the author of 2 books on Palestine. The first one is called Europe's Alliance with Israel, and the second one is called Balfour's Shadow. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to send a video to your conference. I wish you every success with this conference, and I send you my full solidarity. Ever since Israel imposed a full blockade on Gaza in the year 2007, European Union representatives have responded in a hypocritical fashion. During the early stages of this full blockade, some European Union representatives pointed out accurately that the blockade amounted to collective punishment, which of course is illegal under international law. The same representatives have not explained that the European Union actually enables the blockade of Gaza. One significant way in which the European Union has enabled the blockade is by financing the upgrading of surveillance equipment used in Karem Abu Salem, the crossing for goods between Gaza and Israel. Karem Abu Salem, or Kerem Shalom in Hebrew, is controlled by the Israeli military occupation, which has placed severe restrictions on the entry of essential items into Gaza. Kerem Abu Shalem is in reality a military checkpoint. By equipping that checkpoint, the European Union became complicit in the collective punishment of Gaza, the very crime it claims to oppose. The European Union's hierarchy would like everyone to believe that they are unfailingly generous towards the people of Gaza and towards Palestinians more generally. My friends, it is important not to take European Union claims at face value. Serious questions must be asked about who really benefits from the European Union's generosity. The first point that should be made is that international law obliges Israel to meet the basic needs of Palestinians living under its occupation. So by appointing itself the world's largest donor to the Palestinians, the European Union is actually relieving Israel of its legally binding responsibilities. In other words, the European Union is paying for the occupation of Palestine. The European Union's aid for Gaza is closely inspected by the Israeli military. Does the European Union protest against how a foreign army seeks to dictate its aid policies and its aid activities? The short answer to that question is no. On the contrary, the European Union has actually described the Israeli military occupation as one of its partners. The European Union and Israel are both part of an international body called the Ad Hoc Liaison Committee, which discusses every so often how aid for Palestinians can be delivered. A key grouping in overseeing the military occupation, including the blockade of Gaza, is called the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, or COGAT for short. At the moment, this body, COGAT, is headed by a military general named Hassan Alian. Who is Hassan Alian? Hassan Alian was previously a commander in the Golani Brigade, an elite unit in Israel's military. In that role, he was directly involved in the major attack on Gaza during the summer of 2014. Under his leadership, the Golani Brigade carried out a massacre of 55 Palestinian civilians, including 19 children, in the Shijaya neighborhood of Gaza City. If there was any justice in the world, Hassan Alian would either be in prison or awaiting trial at the International Criminal Court. Instead, he is now continuing to inflict suffering on the people of Gaza by overseeing a relentless blockade. Far from protesting at this obscenity, the European Union allows this despicable war criminal to determine what aid may and may not enter Gaza. Israel subjected Gaza to another major attack in May of this year. That offensive was effectively applauded at the highest levels of the European Union's hierarchy. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission's president, echoed the dishonest version of events offered by Israel. Ursula von der Leyen distorted reality by claiming that it was Israel which had come under attack. By waving a magic wand, Ursula von der Leyen transformed a brutal occupier into an innocent victim. The European Commission has been waving its magic wand again in recent weeks. Israel has just been formally accepted into the European Union's scientific research programme. Known as Horizon Europe, this new research programme has an overall budget of more than 95 billion euros between this year and 2027. Tackling climate change has been identified as one of its key priorities. Because of the European Union's decision to allow Israel participate in this research programme, the state which repeatedly bombs Gaza and steals water from Palestinians in the occupied West Bank has now been transformed into a model for ecological innovation. We can expect that European Union officials will promote Israel's participation in its research activities as beneficial for health and for the environment. Little, if anything, will be said about how Israel's weapons makers have been subsidized under previous European Union research programs and will more than likely be subsidized under this latest program. These companies include Elbit and Israel Aerospace Industries, whose weapons have been tested out repeatedly on men, women, and children in Gaza. It should be added that a number of discussions have been held between Israeli and European Union representatives recently with a view to deepening relations between the two sides. Such discussions have continued even though Israel is becoming increasingly anti-democratic. Of course, Israel has always been anti-democratic, but it's clearly getting worse, as has been illustrated recently by Israel's decision to blacklist human rights organizations as terrorists. The European Union is an elitist project. European Union representatives do not speak for the people of Europe, and they certainly do not speak for me. Ordinary folk across the continent of Europe are completely opposed to Israel's crimes against humanity. That much was emphasized dramatically by the very large protests against the attack on Gaza in May. But it is often illustrated in less dramatic ways. It is illustrated every time ordinary Europeans refuse to put Israeli produce in their supermarket baskets when they go shopping for groceries. The European Union's elite is obviously powerful, but it is certainly not invincible. People power can result in major victories. It is because of people power that gender equality and LGBT rights are being taken more seriously now than ever before. It is because of people power, and particularly heroic initiatives taken by teenagers, that climate justice has become a hugely topical issue. And of course, it was because of people power that white minority rule was eventually defeated in South Africa. My friends, I have every confidence that people power will help lift the siege of Gaza and bring an end to Israel's rotten system of apartheid. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank David Cronin for his participation and talking about the role of European in encouraging the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. He talked about the program of Horizon Europe. He talked about the importance of raising the awareness to struggle the occupation, to reach the end of the occupation. Now let us move to let us introduce you to Nick Everett. He's the director of Friends of Palestine in Western Australia. He's going to talk about the crime of the Israeli siege in the Gaza Strip and the role of BDS in exposing it.
Dear friends, today I wish to convey to you a message of solidarity from Palestine supporters in Australia. My name is Nick Everett, chairperson of Friends of Palestine Western Australia. It was apartheid in South Africa that awoke my passion for justice as a teenager in the 1980s. It was impossible not to watch the footage of white South African police beating young black protesters in the streets of Johannesburg in 1986 and not be against apartheid. At that time, Nelson Mandela was in prison and condemned as a terrorist by US President Ronald Reagan and UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Many years later, in 2007, the late Reverend Desmond Tutu, a hero of South Africa's anti-apartheid movement, visited the Gaza Strip to speak with witnesses of an Israeli massacre in the Beit Hanun district, where 19 Palestinians, including 7 children, were killed. The following year, Tutu produced a report for the Human Rights Council in which he condemned Israel's siege of Gaza as a gross violation of human rights. Comparing Israel's actions with apartheid South Africa, Tutu told Palestinian activists, "I've witnessed the systematic humiliation of Palestinian men, women and children by members of the Israeli security forces. Their humiliation is familiar to all black South Africans who were corralled and harassed and insulted and assaulted by the security forces of the apartheid government." In 2014, Tutu endorsed the boycott, divestments and sanctions campaign, stating, "In South Africa, we could not have achieved our democracy without the help of people around the world, who, through the use of non-violent means, such as boycotts and divestment, encouraged their governments and other corporate actors to reverse decades-long support for the apartheid regime." Over the past 15 years here in Perth, we've rallied in the streets each time Israel has bombed Gaza, we've commemorated the Nakba, and we've stood alongside the Palestinian community. We've promoted boycotts and demanded divestment by companies doing business with Israel. We've demanded the Australian government end its support for Israeli apartheid and colonisation. However, the most successful initiative to date, led by BDS Australia, has been the call on artists to boycott the 2022 Sydney Festival, taking place right now in Australia's most populous city. Sydney Festival negotiated a star partnership with the Israeli Embassy for an amount of $20,000, a tiny fraction of the festival's multi-million-dollar budget. This deal was agreed last May, in the same month that Israel was ethnically cleansing Palestinians from East Jerusalem and bombing besieged Gaza. The festival's board chose to ignore global protests, including protests of tens of thousands in Australian cities, condemning Israel's brutal repression of a new Palestinian intifada. In response, BDS activists called on artists not to perform. To date, more than 30 artists have heeded our call, and 10,000 people have signed our petition telling the festival art washing human rights violations is not acceptable. The power of the Sydney Festival boycott has been shown in the international media coverage gained. Festival chair David Kirk has been forced to apologise for the move a week after the festival's opening, but has refused to end the sponsorship deal and return the money. Today, Israel, like South Africa 35 years ago, is widely recognised as an apartheid state, colonising Palestinian land through theft, violence and occupation. We must continue with what we've begun, to turn that sentiment into action and to force governments and corporations to cease their collaboration with Israeli apartheid. We salute you and we stand with you. Long live Palestine. Thank you.
To thank Nick Everett, the Australian activist, for sharing the similarities and the differences between the apartheid in South Africa and the Israeli crimes in the West Bank. He indicated his activists to expose the occupation and show his crimes. He talked about the BDS in Australia because their participation in Sydney and how many artists have been withdrawn. Now let us have a message to the world by Nadine Abdel Latif.
Hello everyone, my name
Hello, I'm Nadine Abdulatif, and today I'm here because I want to talk about Palestine in Gaza. And I'm part of the 16th Media Group, and today I want to talk about Gaza, as I said, and how it's going under the siege. And first of all, before I was born, we have seen lots of aggressions, lots of siege that happened to us. Since 2007, we have saw death, we have saw wars, we have saw everything, and we can't live a normal life. I personally have seen 3 wars. 3 wars as a child. I had nothing to do. I just stood there seeing people die, seeing people cry without doing anything. So that's why today I'm here, a member of 16th October Media Group. I'm here to talk about Palestine and how we suffered. Children are dying because why? Why? Because of the occupiers coming and refusing for them to get their medicine, refusing for them to be alive, refusing for them to have their medicine. And that's not right. We are children. We are human. Are we not human? Are we not human to live a normal life? We are human like everyone else in this room. We deserve to live. We deserve to have our rights, and we deserve to see our future. And not only kids die, parents cry because their kids are dying. Kids are crying because their parents are dying. What am I supposed to do? I said that I'm an 11-year-old. I'm an 11-year-old standing here and talking in front of those people. Imagine how I feel because I saw words. I feel exhausted. I feel scared. I feel traumatized after I have seen all of that, what happened. My neighbor's kids died. Everyone around me, I feel like they're dead. I don't feel safe in my home. I don't feel safe going out. I don't feel safe anywhere. Then where am I supposed to feel safe? In the sky? In the sea? No. They block us from going to the sea so we can fish for fish. We can't even eat fish because of them blocking the place. We can't even go fly planes and have fun and travel because of them. Did we do something wrong? Did we do something wrong? I have a question. Did we do something wrong for them? No, we're people with rights. We are people who are humans, who stand up here and talk. This is why I joined 16th October Media Group. This is why I joined them, because I saw them that they talk about Palestine, they talk about how people die, they talk about children, they talk about rights. This is why I joined this group. And this is why I came here to talk, because I'm part of this group and this is my job. I'd love it. Imagine seeing an 11-year-old saying, "This is my job to defend my home. This is my job." 2.3 million people are living in Gaza. Imagine this small place. 2.3 million people live here. This is just a small place of our country, Palestine. And even though that Ramallah and Jerusalem is only 1 hour drive to go there, we can't go there. Why? Because of the aggressions, because of the occupiers, because of children seeing death, crying for their parents to be alive, crying for people. I can't even learn without being unsafe. So imagine how all the children feel. Not just me, how you guys feel, how everyone feels. This was only a small part of how we feel. I hope I'll see you soon again, and thank you.
شكرا جزيلا للطفلة المبدعة نادين عبد اللطيف. بذلك نكون وصلنا إلى ختام الجلسة الثانية من المؤتمر أو الملتقى الدولي وأترككم الآن مع الجلسة الثالثة تصطحبكم فيها الأستاذة إيناس غنام، وتتحدث عن الآثار المترتبة على قطاع غزة نتيجة الحصار الإسرائيلي. تفضل يا أستاذة إيناس.
في البداية شكرا لك تالا. كان هذا
At the beginning, thank you, Tala. That was for being here and staying with us till now, till the third session, which is the last one, which is going to be presented by me, Inas Ghandam, the manager of We're Not Number project in Gaza Strip. In this session, in this session, we're going to talk about the aftermath of the results happening, the war on Gaza Strip. We're going to start with Ghada Nabil, where she's going to talk about the aftermath of the siege on Gaza, on the health and social atmosphere in Gaza Strip. Hello. Today I'm going to talk about the aftermath of the siege on Gaza Strip on most of the most important sides of Gaza Strip, especially on the instrumental, the economic and the health situation in Gaza. We all know that Israel has been forcing a siege on Gaza for more than 11 years on Gaza. It's affecting all sides of the life in Gaza and the life of everyone in Gaza. Israel is doing this as a sort of a punitive collective punishment of people of all sides and levels in Gaza, which happened during multiple offenses, political and wars on Gaza Strip, which led to the growth or the increase of poverty and low life situations in Gaza. Israel has worked on decreasing the amount of goods that are entering Gaza and putting the structures on the movement of people in Gaza Strip. This difficulties has been forced, especially after the wars, affecting the entering of materials needed for building and healthcare, like cement and metals and other resources and things that are used for rebuilding buildings and factories. the effects on the economic situation in Gaza. These problems, there are multiple problems that are caused by the siege, especially the lack of resources that are entering Gaza Strip, and the lack of oil and fossil that is entering Gaza Strip. This led to the stopping of the working of many of factories in Gaza. This also led to the loss of jobs for many people working on these factories. Some of these factories are factories that work in making threads and clothing and food supplies and all that. This also led to the decrease of the providing of imports and exports of these factories from Gaza to other countries. I have to point out that the IDF has destroyed multiple factories, almost 300 factory adjacent buildings in Gaza Strip that had 4,000 people working on them, along with stopping of working of many factories in Gaza and the destruction of many others, and the decrease of the production ability in some. The siege and the war has led to the loss of the number of workers in these factories. 270 people are unemployed. Poverty in about 80% of the workers in these factories has been the new. The commercial side is not doing any better yet. The restrictions over the movement of goods and people and the imports and exports in Gaza has been the issue at hand. Since 2005, about 100. Since 2005, the decrease of an increase of the accepted shipments has been about 100 shipments less since 2000 per day since 2005. The closure of most of the ports that has been the case since 2007, 2010. The monthly rate of shipments that are coming out of Gaza and coming into it is less by a tremendous amount. Karm Abu Salam became the only port that to enter and exports and import shipments out of Gaza. Only 50% of the shipments needed to come in and out of Gaza are being allowed these days. For import, in 2005, 10,000 shipments has been coming out of Gaza, which is 833 shipments out of Gaza. But since the beginning of the siege till now, the amount of shipments coming out of Gaza Strip monthly is only 7 shipments per month, which is only 5% of the average before the beginning of the siege. In the beginning of the half of the 2020, only 550 shipments have been coming out of Gaza, which is a medium amount. This is, of course, leaving along the natural development of commerce and the amount of shipments that are needed since in the natural growth of economics. An example to give the effect over the health sector is the most destroyed or affected poorly due to the siege over Gaza. the strategies that are being used by the Israel occupation has been causing this major destruction in Gaza state of the health sector. The needs of individuals and hospitals, of supplies and medical needs are being cut tremendously from what they're supposed to. Civilian wellness is not only their lack of illnesses, but also their ability to live a good life and to be able to get basic health care in their country and out of it if that needs. The destruction of the underground infrastructure for the health sector has been making this situation unbearable and making the ability to make to have the resources, the medication, or or having the ability to have the machinery needed for the health sector for people who suffer from cancer and renal failure. That being said, people who can't get the medical care they need from Gaza Strip are also unable to go to the West Bank or quote-unquote to Israel to get their medical care, or even to go to Egypt for that matter. Because they have to wait a long time until they get a permit, or if they get any, to go to get the medical care they need. This led to the death of a huge number of those patients, whom a big number of which are women and children. So sometimes a patient could get a permit to travel, but not his companion, who's going to take care of him along the way, or vice versa. The right of getting medical care has been a compromise that a lot of people are not able to have. And this long wait is not only an inconvenience, but also led to the development of the deterioration of the overall health situation of those people who have been waiting so long for get a permit, some of which have been suffering from cancer and other medical situation in which time is of the essence. In 2020, instead of having 65% average of people being accepted to get their medical care, has dropped to 40%. According to reports, around 51 million people has been declined to get 51,000 people have been declined the right to go and get medical care from other countries. The medical sector finds itself in a complicated situation where it does not have the ability to attend to all the patients in Gaza, or lacks the resources or machinery or medication to help people in Gaza Strip. Most medical instruments are permitted to come in, or most of the patients are being jailed or accepted to pass through. This is also the siege over Gaza is an obvious breach, it's a gross breach of human rights happening in Gaza Strip, according to Geneva 4th law in 1977. It's the duty of the occupation state to help provide the medical and food supply to people living in Gaza. What Israel is doing for the last 15 years of siege is a embodiment of a strategy or philosophy of punitive collective punishment of people living in Gaza Strip, which is unaccepted by international law, especially in Geneva rules. The international human law, this deepens Israel doing compound breaches over the lives of people living in Gaza Strip. These breaches are a reflection of the destruction of life of people in Gaza on all the levels there are. Thank you, Ms. Nada. That was an inclusive report. These statistics show that what's happening in Gaza is leading us to a dark path, which we are working very hard to enlighten. Talking about future generations and what Nada talked about concerning the health sector in Gaza Strip and the lack of reach of medication and to healthcare in Gaza and the ability for people to travel to other countries. Today we have Najwan El-Samna, who is a mother of a child who has been living with renal failure since his birth. Today, she will talk to us about the suffering that she and her child face, and other parents of children with renal failure in Gaza Strip. Thank you for your generous invite for me today to talk about the effect of the war on the health sector in Gaza Strip, especially the children who suffer from renal patients in Rantisi Hospital in Gaza. So blessed be your efforts. At the beginning, I want to shed light on a common misconception, which is that renal failure is something that only senior patients gain because of diabetes, hypertension, or about poor use of medication. What a lot of people don't know is that a lot of children suffer from or gain renal failure in the beginning, on the first year of their lives due to genetic problems. Today I will talk about my child, Yahya, considering being one of those children who suffer from this issue. I called him Yahya, which is roughly translates to he lives. He became the person who's able to live more than anyone else from us. Today he is 12 years old, and he was first diagnosed by having an autoimmune caused renal failure since he was months old. He was trying to get as much medication as possible to delay his start of dialysis. He started his first dialysis when he became 5 years. From there, the change in his life started. He stopped being this child who laughs and dances and enjoys and gives joy to those who are around him, to become this depressed little child who became withered day by day in front of my eyes, without me able to do anything for him but to give him to the hospital 4 days a week, bearing his anger and his daily question of why am I like the other children. And because of Yahya's veins are so delicate in comparison to his peers, his veins started to collapse and to clot, which made him unable to get medication he needs. A good amount. The attachment, the venal attachment of Yahya has been changed. Has been changed. Can't work for more than 3 weeks. He has been sent to the hospital, and I provided my papers with him to be able to travel with him, being aware, being his primary caretaker, and being aware of the medication he needs. I was shocked to find that I was rejected to travel with my child, who was only 6 then and was completely attached to me. How would he accept that he would travel with someone else, a stranger perhaps? I also asked myself who would understand his needs, who would give him his medications on time. How will I let him travel away from me for the first time? And because of the situations that were in hand, I had to accept reality and to send him with one of my relatives, while I promised him to keep communicating with him on time. After a long wait of a month or more, Yahya reached Nablus Hospital, and he got his surgery of getting a vein attachment that has been working for 3 years. 3 years has passed with success. He used to get dialysis on time. He made friendships with the doctors and nurses of the hospital. It was his school. It was the only life that he knew then. Yahya became fond of the hospital because that was the only place he'd go to daily. And because there he'd feel less alone with other patients. And with that being known, his muscles began to dystrophy. He wouldn't able to move without screaming out of pain. He needed to have a wheelchair to be able to move. I used to clean his room one day when I found that he wrote something on his notepaper with red color, where he wrote, "I thank the chair because it helps me move. I thank my bed because it makes me rest at night. I thank my nurses because they make me alive without leaving me behind." And after 3 years, we were back to the square one to get a venal attachment for his body once again. This led the delay affected to the delay in his dialysis. The quality of his dialysis became less, which caused him in some sort of burns in his body that were unable to be buried. His pains were close to in the words of his caretakers, his doctors, they said that the pain he was in was somewhere close to that of a heart attack. After all his veins closed up and were unable to become an entrance for his dialysis, Yahya got four very dangerous surgeries, and the last one was success. There they got all the tests needing to show why he was unable to get the medical care he had. They found that his burn-like problems started to decrease tremendously, which were the result of a poor venal attachment. Yahya knew nothing in his life but the chair he sat on dialysis. He didn't have any friends but those who only have the issues he have. He got old and matured way too early. And despite all, he is still my child, whose our whole life is surrounding him. Everything we do is attached and affected by what he does. His smile became like a general punishment. They remind us of all the pain he goes through, but still is the joy, the cause of the joy we have in our hearts. Yahya sends his peace. Yahya, he lives. I hope.
شكرا لك سيدة نجوان على مشاركتنا قصتك وتفاصيل الحياة اليومية.
Thank you for sharing your story about your child as a living example of what other children suffer from in Gaza. The world always looks about an old new fear of where humanity is the cause of the destruction of the world. This comes from the human's nature, the human's ability to destroy, and how it affects the global warming and how it affects the world we live in. The world forgets what is the effect of the butterfly effect. A siege in Gaza can cause destruction of the environment in Gaza and maybe of the whole world. Today we have Dr. Ahmed Hillis, who's who's an academician who's going to talk about the environmental issue in Gaza Strip.
أسعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير. بعد يحيى مش عارف إذا بضل كلام يعني.
After Yahya's mom, I don't know what I'd have to say. I don't know where to start. The pain that we felt along with her and Yahya's is a pain that would affect us, that had affected us for more than 70 years now. Since the beginning of the occupation on Gaza, Yahya has been there in every country, in every place, in every aisle, in every street, in every town in Gaza, in different names, different forms. Cancer patients, 150 cancer patients each month are being diagnosed, which need medication that is not in Gaza. We're unable to travel. Sometimes, not only the companion that is unallowed to travel, but also the patient themselves. Our pain is complicated. The war of 2014, we asked we wanted to get testing of the land after the war to get an exact effect, to know the exact effect of the war on the physical, on the environmental and the economic and all different sides of Gaza, to get it tested professionally by a third party that comes to Gaza to show a clear testing or show a clear reflection of the result of the wars. We want people to come in and to test what is the cause of the ongoing destruction of people's lives and the rise in diseases in Gaza. What is the water? What kind of water does people like Yahya swim in? Or the kind of food they eat? The soil and how it's affected by all that. To test maybe radioactive emissions in water, in the land, in somewhere. To understand what's going on in Gaza. What is the cause of this rise of patients and illnesses in general? What do they throw on us? We have to be able to know exactly what is the environmental effects that we are getting very quickly after the war, especially very rapidly, to be able to measure it correctly and completely. We made a study locally, and we saw numbers and statistics that were shocking, but the occupation does not give us any ability, any chance to have a clear insight over what's happening in Gaza. We want to be able to have 70 years ago 2,000 people left their house, 80,000 people left their houses from different places of Gaza Strip. They were sent to refugee camps and hundreds. 80% of dwellers in Gaza Strips are actually refugees. This is why they want to go back to their country, go back to their towns. 2/3 of Gaza is people who who are refugees, who have to or want to go back to their town. This will make the issue of most of the environmental issues of Gaza Strip will go away.
2 مليون و200 ألف على 378 كيلو متر مربع بيطلع ضغط رهيب من البشر في هالمساحة الضيقة. هدول مش
population density is more than 20,000 population per each square kilometers in urban places in Gaza. There was a lot of environmental issues in Gaza. There's a big level of pollution in Gaza. All of this is something we live each day and we live through each day. The main cause of the issue in Gaza is the occupation itself, not only the siege, but the occupation itself, and the siege comes in to deteriorate, double or triple the issue. The issue of water supply, where we lack. Israel deals with Gaza as if it's a different country, where a different country with autonomy who's able or should be able to take care of itself completely. There's no city in the world who's unable to be sufficient by itself without having any help or being able to travel or move around or have an economic. Gaza is one of the tiniest cities in the world. Cairo is 3 times more bigger than Gaza. Can I tell Cairo to have self-reliance sufficiently? No, I can't do that, because that's not something that a city can do on its own. Most of people in Gaza Strip are fully reliant on rainwater. We have only 110 square kiloliters of water in Gaza. Of water comes from the rain, and only while we need 220 million square kilometers of water each year, we only get half of that water. And even the half of the water that we get out of rainwater some of it is lost here and there in sewage water, and is being lost because of the lack of a good infrastructure in Gaza. I'll give you a simple example. Gaza's municipality gives 110 20 invoice, but most of those invoices are unpaid because of those people lack the financial ability to give the money to the municipality. The municipality lacks funding, so it's unable to give the services that it promises. The only issue, the big issue, the main issue is occupation. Our economic situation in Gaza has been affecting our environmental life in Gaza. You have to ask yourself the big question. 3/4 of the water in the underwater water reserve is lost, and most of it is being infiltrated with seawater intrusion. All I get around here is less than half a meter of water each year. We don't have water resources in Gaza. That's only one issue. The water treatment units. The water treatment units, and I am a consultant there, they got all bombed in the last war. The water treatment unit in Bridge got bombed before it started working, where it's 60. The occupation stopped the Gaza Strip of getting any clean water from any of the valleys around Gaza. 3,400 liters of water being harvested each year was in a lot of 3 valleys in Gaza where the water resources has been cut. These valleys has been cut by having some sort of a whales or cutting the water supply to those valleys from those. And also getting water from Tabariya, which doesn't even, which we don't get. We get menial amount of water, in which we pay most of this, which is paid by the Palestinian people, the Gazan people. It's a big topic. Gaza, to tackle this issue of the water and the environmental situation in Gaza cannot be done in 10 minutes. We made a lot of testing, a lot of studies over those places. The Israeli occupation I can enclose a study where 1,500 pieces and parts that are needed to fix and maintain some of or most the water treatment units in Gaza. This is a chaos. How are you going to develop this country where the development of the population is 4% per year? How are you going to develop this place that will keep up with this growth? While having this kind of strategy on the borders, where it does not allow most of the things to enter the country, where you occasionally get a war that destroys all of the infrastructure and bombs most of those water treatment units and those places, and then you ask us to live and to sustain and to be able to live. We're unable to recycle. We're unable to send recyclable resources outside of Gaza. The electricity cuts has reached to 60-70% cut of the time. We need 60 million watts of electricity to Gaza to keep up with, to be able to treat water in Gaza. We destroy more than 120 million liters, 120 meters of water, of sewage water. We throw it to the sea. the only resource of having fun in Gaza Strip, the only place that people could go to enjoy their time, or to have a change of venue, or change of is to go and to visit the beach, which is becoming a hazardous, a health hazardous area. Most
بقولوا في الورق 300 متر، أنا بقول لك 700 متر واللي بيصل بطخوه. وهي كلها مناطق زراعية.
You can't even plant in most of the areas in Gaza. You're unable to plant in most of the areas that are by the borders. You're unable to plant, and if the farmers, when they plant, they get shot, and when they get shot, they try to use the lands that are parts that they can reach by using a lot of cancerous or planting aid products in those places. Sewage water usually sometimes has been mingling with drinking water in Gaza every war. The destruction has caused a great pollution in the drinking water. The war, the occupation has been destroying life in Gaza, has been in so many ways. As long as the occupation has the same strategies, the same way of treating people in Gaza, the same strategies, the same political plans, people like Yahya and his mother will be only one example of many of the destruction over Gaza. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. That was very helpful. There's nothing I can add to what you said, so I'll go and to start. We'll talk about the cause that is the most important. How can the siege in Gaza affect the infrastructure and the agriculture and the COVID problems in Gaza Strip? Today we have Ahmed Muqdad, who's going to tell us about we have Dr. Mohammed Muqdad, who's an academic of economics in Islamic University of Gaza. He's going to talk about the aftermath of the war and destruction of the economic situation of Gaza and the growth of employment and poverty levels. Good morning, everyone. Before I start my talk, I want to wish Yahya's moms for that her son will get well. In this paper, I'll talk about the economical issues that are caused by the siege, which has been written by Mohammed Muqdad and Nasser. At the beginning, when we talk about the Gaza Strip, we talk about a collapse of all the economic wellness. There are two aspects in the destruction of this economical situation in Gaza. And the first thing is the Israeli veto over Gaza, and the second thing is the siege of Gaza. The Israeli strategies has been affecting the situation on Gaza. After the Palestinian authorities have been talking about the issue of economic following of Gaza to Israel. The Palestinian economic is fragile and reliant, dependent completely on Israel and the donors and their A lot of Palestinians have been losing their jobs. In 2006, the Palestinian divergent, the ongoing aggressions on Gaza ever since 2008, 2012, 2014, and 2021, and the various in between issues. The siege and the continuous destruction of our Gaza Strip has been the cause of the basic unemployment. The employment level in Gaza has been 49% in 2020. And also the poverty levels in Gaza has been reaching 59%. We move in to talk about the main reasons of the poor economical status in Gaza. The first to mention is the occupation of Gaza. Ever since the control of the destruction of the political situation in Gaza has been through isolating Gaza Strip at the beginning of the siege and making Gaza a stray country away from anywhere else and unable to be part of any of the economical street. There's an occupation, so there's wars and aggressions over Gaza. Israel has closed all of the borders and put unbelievable laws and restrictions over how or when or what can enter and come out of Gaza. This affected the life of Palestinians in Gaza. The problem also in the issues of having two governments in Gaza has been also taking part in the effect of people in Gaza. Most of them got got laid off or got premature pensions. The UNRWA financial issue has been also taking part in affecting the destruction of or the decrease of the good political status in Gaza Strip. Financial help of UNRWA has been decreased. The political changes after the Arab Spring has affected or caused a more destruction of the political state of Gaza, which caused the closure of the border along Egypt. Last but not least, COVID-19. The effects of COVID-19 still destroy the Palestinian, the already struggling Palestinian economy, affecting it to have 11.5% decrease in the production rate, which is the economical outcome of the siege, according to the UNCTAD's in 2012. The financial cost of the occupation of Gaza Strip in the past 10 years has been estimated of 16.5 million. The effect on a person's livelihood has been more than $900 per person. We're going to talk in points that includes the it is known that the development level of Gaza since 2007 and 2020 has been 44% growth. The growth economically show that the statistics show that the the economic situation has been struggling and been decreasing in obvious ways. Gaza's economic was about a third of the economic of Palestine only in 2007. 59% of people living in Gaza are living under poverty. Food security has been decreased to become only 68%. The occupation has made the culture of getting financial and food aid a kind of a philosophy for people living in Gaza. The lack or the decrease of the shipments that are allowed into Gaza Strip has caused the raise of their prices and making them more expensive for people to buy items in Gaza. The imports and exports of plants in Gaza has been something completely restricted. It affected farmers' hemorrhage money. The buffer zones in Gaza are almost 35% of the lands in Gaza that are able to be planted, or the plantable fertile lands in Gaza. Those buffer zones, whenever they are being planted, farmers that plant those buffer zones are being continuously shot at, and the crops are being thrown with toxins being thrown on those crops by the occupation. Farmers unable to fish, fishermen unable to fish from the sea that is next to them. Tens of goods are unallowed to enter Gaza Strip under the pretext of double use. They are being used for other purposes and so on and so forth. This led to the closure of a lot of factories in Gaza and the loss of all those losses are not being reimbursed, not being fixed. Some of those factories are closing, and most of them are in huge debts. The loss, this continuous issues in the economic situation has led to the flood of most of big capitals to invest in other countries and other places, which also further affected the financial status in Gaza poorly. Palestine, Gaza, is unable to use the fossil fuel resource that it has because Palestinians are unallowed to take use of any of the gas or they have in the sea. The ports are being controlled completely. Crossings. Israel has made laws against the import of many of the goods to Gaza Strip, and namely building materials that are needed continuously. مقابل 10,400 شاحنة في العام 2005 أي قبل فرض الحصار. So 7,000 shipments used to be the normal number. 14 shipments a week. خرجت نحو 14 شاحنة بالمعدل الشهري من قطاع غزة إلى الخارج. 40 shipments a week comes from Gaza to other places farmer or agricultural goods. First, stop the Israeli veto over the second, to fulfill the international call for the end of the siege over Gaza. Three, the taking out the laws that are controlling what enters and exits Gaza Strip. Yeah, to give ability for people to be able to export and import whatever they need in Gaza, especially the long list of W items that are unallowed by the Israeli occupation. Also, 6, to give the ability to people, to farmers, to be able to fish and to be able to reach further in the sea, to be able to
دعم سياسة إحلال الواردات لخلق فرص عمل تساهم في علاج مشكلتي الفقر والبطالة.
All of these will play a role in enforcing the infrastructure of Gaza, of the water supply and the electricity plants and so on, to end Paris agreement, or to rewrite the agreement in a way that will put in mind the best of Gaza. 12, giving the people in Gaza should be able to use a more realistic approach to to giving enough care to the private sector in Gaza Strip, and enforcing education in these fields, and giving political support.
شكرا لك دكتور رائد قدور على هذا المجهود الرائع.
Thank you, Dr. Ra'id Qaddour, for giving the results over the economic results of having the siege of Gaza Strip. And with the words of Mr. Muqdad and Mr. Ra'id Qaddoura, we end our session today, and I start back with Mr. Ahmed Abu Tima in his words ending this session. Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Inas. Thank you for the guests, for their words. Thank you, Miss Yahya's mom. I hope that your son finds all the help he needs. At the end, I have to give thanks to Mrs. Ghada Nabil. Dr. Muhammad Muqdad, and takes on his behalf Mr. Qaddoura. Now, please be ready. Mrs. Najwan Samna. Dr. Ahmed Hisham Hillis. A final word. I want to send my thanks. Okay. I will have to take a picture. Let's just take a picture first. Yeah. At the end, I want to send my thanks for attending this session. That was very helpful. What we can sum from all this been said, that the occupation, that the siege is an ongoing crime. this crime has caused tragedies on the humanitarian front and to the economic, environmental fronts. Facing this siege should be something that has been tackled internationally, not only in local fronts in Gaza Strip. We need to stop the situation. Activists from over the world, activists that are coming here today to hear the talk today, should take part in fighting this issue. We want to thank you. We hope that we would work towards that goal, which is finding justice for people living in Gaza Strip. I hope that you stick around on your seats, everyone, so that you get lunch break.
Hello, my friends. My name is Peter Larson, and I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, Canada, where today it's minus 18 degrees out and we have more than a meter of snow. But my heart is warmed by being in touch with my friends in Gaza, and I'm very pleased to have been invited to say a few words to this conference. I have been to Gaza a couple of times before. In 2018, I was there at the Great March of Return. And I think I know a little bit about your situation. Your conference today is called the Blockade and Ongoing Crime. It's an excellent title for the conference. The ongoing Israeli blockade of Gaza is an ongoing Israeli crime. But it's only one of many Israeli crimes that started in 1947-48 with the Nakba and continues today with its denial of the right of return for Palestinian refugees. I have spoken and written in Canada on many times, on many occasions, with many groups about the situation in Gaza. I know about the electricity shortages. I know about the drones. I know about the snipers along the fence. I know about the Gaza fishermen who are harassed by the Israeli Navy. I know about the fact that Israel refuses to allow most Palestinians from Gaza to go to Al-Quds or to go to the West Bank or to see their relatives. I know that. But to my great frustration, all my speeches and all my articles have not really had very much impact on Canadian opinion or on Canadian government policy. This is a great frustration for me. Canadians continue to be reluctant to criticize Israel or to demand that our government impose any kind of punishment on Israel for its crimes against you. Why is this? This is a big conundrum. It's a very serious question. Canadians know that things are wrong in Gaza, not in detail, but they know in the outline. And they know that there is an Israeli blockade, which is illegal under UN resolutions. So why is it that Canadians who can get very concerned about the human rights problems of the Uyghurs in China or about the Black Americans are not very concerned about your human rights? Why are they not demanding that the Canadian government take strong action against Israel and its violations of your basic human rights? I've thought about this question a lot because it is a huge frustration. And I think I know the answer, or part of the answer, and I'd like to share it with you. I think the main reason is that Canadians are still afraid of what you would like to do to Israeli Jews if you had the opportunity. Canadians still feel very guilty about the Holocaust. It was 75 years ago, but 6 million people, 6 million Jews died, and Canada did not do very much to help. We feel still guilty about that. And we want to make sure that we don't do anything which might contribute to another Holocaust. And very effective Israeli propaganda paints you all as terrorists, as anti-Semitic terrorists. As you know, since 9/11, Canadians and Americans feel very nervous about Arabs and Muslims. And Israeli propaganda tells Canadians that Hamas is kind of like a Palestinian ISIS or Daesh, thirsting after Jewish blood. This propaganda, of course, makes me very angry and frustrated. I know it isn't true. It's totally unfair, but unfortunately, it's totally effective. So the question is, how can I change Canadian perceptions? How do I get Canadians to stop believing that the only way for Israeli Jews to protect themselves is to keep Palestinians under control, to dominate them militarily, and in fact, to prevent millions of refugees from returning to Palestine? That fear that Israeli Jews have or portray is, of course, the same fear that whites had in South Africa, that there would be a mass slaughter of whites. And the Israeli lobby today paints a horrific vision of Jews being slaughtered or expelled or whatever if Palestine were to be liberated. Here's where I'm stuck. I don't know what to answer them when they say that. I can't respond to the fears of Canadians about what a liberated Palestine would mean for Jews, because I don't know. After many visits and many discussions with Palestinians, I still don't know what your vision is for the future. How do we do something about this? Well, it's not up to me as a Canadian to tell you what your vision should be. That's yours. As an outsider, that's not my role. It's entirely up to you. But I think that once I will have a much greater chance of developing support for Palestinians once I can tell Canadians what your shared collective vision is for a future Palestine, including what would happen to Jews. Western thinking about South Africa began to change when the African National Congress transformed itself from being an anti-apartheid movement into a movement based on a movement for a future based on racial equality. If the Palestinian vision is not about revenge, but about equality and justice for all, if your political organizations can communicate that vision to the outside world, I think I will have a better chance to change Canadian thinking and get Canadians to be more active in opposing Israel's unfair and illegal blockade of Gaza. I thank you for inviting me to share my views. Good luck to all of you in your conference on an excellent topic, and good luck to all of us. Ma salama.